What if I told you that the silence you wake up to, the stillness that feels almost unbearable, is actually the doorway to becoming the strongest version of yourself? You open your eyes. No buzzing phone. No morning plans. No notifications, lighting up your screen like fireworks. Just you. Just silence. And for a brief moment, it feels like peace. Until that ache creeps in. Not because you're missing someone, but because deep down you're wondering if anyone even notices you're here. That's the moment most men panic. They grab their phones, scroll endlessly, text someone they shouldn't, not out of desire, but desperation. Desperate to feel seen. Because somewhere along the line we were taught that if no one's calling, no woman is texting, no plans are waiting, then we must be doing something wrong. But here's the question we rarely ask. What if that silence isn't a punishment but a portal? What if solitude isn't a curse but a calling? You see, we live in a world that confuses noise with worth, distraction with connection, attention with love. But the man who chooses stillness, who walks alone by choice, isn't lost. He's focused. He's rebuilding. And he's becoming someone that most people will never understand, but will never forget. This video isn't for everyone. It's for the man who's tired of pretending, tired of performing for approval, tired of shrinking just to fit into rooms that never saw his value to begin with. And if that sounds like you, then you're in the right place. Because at Daily Stoic Habits, we're not here to chase popularity. We're here to cultivate clarity, strength, and purpose from the inside out. If this message resonates with something deep within you, hit that like button. Not for us, but for yourself. Subscribe and follow Daily Stoic Habits because the journey we're walking together is one most men never dare to take. Now, take a breath, because what comes next might just be the turning point you've been avoiding. Let's begin with what most men fear the most, the silence. Let me ask you something most people are too afraid to say out loud. When's the last time you were completely alone, without reaching for a distraction? Not alone in a room with your phone. Not alone with music playing or Netflix in the background, but truly, brutally alone. Just you, your thoughts, and a silence thick enough to hear your heartbeat. That's not peace for most men. That's terror. Because here's the truth. Most men don't fear being without people. They fear what being alone reveals. They fear what shows up when the noise dies down, when the stimulation fades, when there's no text, no alert, no one saying, "You good, bro?" You sit in a dark room, and for once there's nothing coming in. No one asking for your time, no one reacting to your posts. Just the sound of your breath, and something deeper underneath it, your thoughts, your regrets, your truth. See, silence doesn't yell, it doesn't judge, it just opens the vault, and whatever you've buried in there, it comes rushing out. The things you swore you moved past, the woman who left without explanation, the job you didn't go for because you were scared, the version of you that was supposed to rise but never showed up, they all reappear. Unfiltered, uninvited, unforgiving, and you can feel it. The discomfort in your chest. That voice saying, "You're behind. You should be doing more. Why are you alone again?" And that's where the escape begins. You reach for your phone. You check Instagram. You text someone you shouldn't, just to feel wanted, just to feel like someone out there sees you. But here's the twist. You're not running from boredom. You're running from yourself. Because in silence, the performance stops. The audience disappears. The roles you've been playing melt away. And suddenly, there's no script. Just the real you. And for most men, that's the scariest part. Because silence doesn't let you hide. It doesn't let you talk over the truth. It forces you to face it. Every promise you broke to yourself. Every habit you said you'd fix. Every time you told yourself tomorrow and tomorrow never came. That's what the silence brings. And that's why most men stay busy. They keep moving, woman to woman, party to party, goal to goal, not to build a life, but to escape a truth. They don't want to feel empty. They just want to feel anything other than their own reflection. But here's where everything changes. If you can stay, not run, not numb, just stay, breathe, sit with it, let it rise. The shame, the doubt, the fear, and then something incredible begins to unfold, slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. You realize you're still here, still breathing, still capable, still you. And those dark thoughts, they're not your identity. They're echoes, old scripts, worn-out loops passed down from parents, culture, and every moment you felt like you didn't measure up. They knock, but you don't have to answer. You begin to learn that you can sit in discomfort without falling apart, that you can feel pain without letting it define you, that you can be alone without being lost. That's the shift. The silence doesn't break you. It wakes you. It forces you to sift through the wreckage and ask, what do I actually believe about myself? Who am I without the noise? What happens if I stop distracting myself and start becoming? And this doesn't happen overnight. The first few times it hurts. Your insecurities echo louder than ever. Your breath feels tight. Your thoughts feel heavy. You start to question everything. Am I enough? Does anything I do matter? Will I always feel this alone? But then deeper, clarity starts to take root, like embers glowing under the ash. You realize your survival isn't dependent on others seeing you. It's dependent on you seeing you. You begin to understand that growth doesn't begin in the gym, or in the books, or in motivational clips. It starts in the quiet when the only voice in the room is yours. You stop needing someone to text you back to feel valued. You stop craving likes to feel validated. You stop jumping into relationships just to silence your internal emptiness, because you've learned to sit in it, to walk through the fire, to feel the pain without giving it the wheel. That's rare. That's powerful. That's stoic. You become the man who didn't flinch, the man who sat in the storm and didn't run, the man who faced the mirror and didn't look away. You become someone who no longer fills the void, but allows it to exist. And in doing so, you reclaim something most people never touch: inner command. You begin to lead yourself, not because the world is watching, but because you're finally watching yourself. You stop jumping from woman to woman thinking love will fix your lack of identity. You stop chasing goals you don't believe in, just to impress people you don't respect. You stop filling your schedule out of fear that stillness might show you something you're not ready to see. But now you're ready. You've sat in the fire, and you came out forged, not burned. You're not numb. You're not bitter. You're clear, and that clarity begins to radiate. Your words carry weight. Your presence carries depth. Your silence speaks, louder than the noise ever did, because now, when you speak, it's not to be heard. It's because you have something real to say. You've stopped performing. You've stopped pleasing. You've stopped running, and in that space, the real man begins to emerge, one who doesn't need validation, one who doesn't chase applause, one who doesn't fear being alone, because he knows solitude is the forge of greatness. That's the paradox. The man who is willing to walk alone is the one the world can't ignore, because he's built something no one can take away: a centered mind, a disciplined heart, and a life that doesn't bend with every opinion. That man, he doesn't beg to be chosen. He chooses himself. You've faced the silence. You sat in the fire and didn't flinch. You've peeled away the noise and started listening to the voice within. But now comes the harder part, because even if you've stopped running from yourself, you might still be running toward something just as dangerous: the need to be seen, not in a spiritual way, not in a someone sees my soul kind of way, but in the quiet, desperate way most of us don't talk about. The need for validation, that subtle, creeping addiction most men carry without realizing it. It's not alcohol, it's not drugs, it's not gambling. It's approval. It shows up in small ways. You wake up, and the first thing you check isn't how you feel, but your phone. Did she reply? Did they like your story? Did anyone comment on your post? Does anyone see me today? At first glance, it looks harmless. You're just staying connected, right? But look closer. It's not connection, it's dependence. It's the emotional equivalent of reaching for a cigarette, except what you're inhaling is the opinion of strangers. And the high? It's short. You feel noticed. For a second. Maybe even liked. Maybe even admired. But then it fades. And you need another hit. Another comment. Another heart emoji. Another moment of attention to fill a void that attention was never meant to fill. And slowly, without realizing it, you start bending. You adjust your tone just to avoid conflict. You post things you don't believe in just to keep the peace. You laugh at jokes that feel wrong. You say yes when your soul is screaming no. You shrink, you smooth, you shapeshift, all in the name of being liked. Because, let's be honest, deep down most men have been taught that being accepted is more important than being authentic. We've been conditioned to believe that if we're not liked, we're failing. That being approved of is survival. That being chosen by others is proof we matter. But here's the real cost. When you live for approval, you kill your authenticity. You give away your voice. You give away your power. You build an identity made of mirrors, reflecting what others want to see but never revealing who you really are. And over time, that mask you wear, it gets heavy. You smile, but it's hollow. You succeed, but it feels empty. You walk into rooms and feel like a stranger in your own skin. That's what approval addiction does. It steals your soul in exchange for applause. And the worst part? Nobody notices, because on the outside, you seem fine. You're friendly. You're agreeable. You're doing great. But inside, you're screaming. You feel disconnected, disoriented, like you're performing a life that was never yours. So what do? You start the detox, not from caffeine, not from sugar, but from needing to be liked. It's not easy. It doesn't happen overnight. But here's how it begins. You start by getting quiet again, not the silence that breaks you, but the silence that rebuilds you. You stop refreshing your phone. You stop scanning the room for approval. You stop looking at your reflection through other people's eyes, and you ask yourself the question that changes everything. Am I doing this because it's true for me, or because I want someone else to clap for it? That question alone, it's a sword. It cuts through years of performance. It burns away the layers of false self, and it forces you to confront how many of your choices have been made for someone else's comfort, not your own integrity. At first, the withdrawal feels brutal. You'll feel the silence. You'll hear that voice whisper, "If I stop performing, will they still like me? If I speak the truth, will they leave?" And sometimes, yes, they will. Some people will fade when you stop pretending. Some connections will fall away when you start showing up real, but let them go, because you don't want to be surrounded by people who only accept the edited version of you. You want truth. You want peace. You want to be known, not for your mask, but for your marrow. So you keep going. You stop posting just to stay relevant. You stop texting just to fill space. You stop laughing when something isn't funny. You start honoring your time like it matters. You start holding your boundaries like they're sacred, and something incredible happens. Your voice, your real voice, starts to return. Not loud, not flashy, but solid, rooted. A voice that doesn't need to be heard by everyone, just by the one person you've ignored for far too long, you. And that voice, it changes everything. You stop chasing short-term applause. You stop explaining your values to people who were never listening anyway. You stop apologizing for your standards, because your life is no longer up for debate. You're not asking to be accepted. You're choosing to be aligned. And here's the paradox that hits hardest. The moment you stop trying to be seen, you become impossible to ignore. Not because you're shouting, but because your energy shifts. You walk into a room and you don't need to announce yourself. People feel it. The weight, the calm, the centeredness. You don't demand attention. You carry it. And that is the real power. Because men who chase approval blend in. But men who choose themselves, they stand out. Not by volume, but by truth. They move differently. They speak differently. They listen differently. They lead differently. Because they're not performing anymore. They're living. That kind of man is rare and unforgettable. Not because he pleased everyone, but because he finally pleased the one person who matters most, himself. This detox won't be clean. It'll be messy. It'll cost you fake friendships, surface smiles, and temporary praise. But what you gain clarity. You gain peace. You gain you. You'll sleep deeper. You'll speak clearer. You'll walk with presence. You'll no longer feel like a guest in your own life. You'll take ownership of your time, your truth, your trajectory. And most importantly, you'll stop living for applause and start living with alignment. So, ask yourself right now, where am I still performing? What version of me am I presenting just to be liked? What would it feel like to let that go? And if you're ready for that shift, if you're ready to step into that discomfort and come out powerful, real, and unshakable, then stay with me. Because the next stage isn't just about letting go of who you're not. It's about discovering who you actually are. And that's when something unexpected happens. You begin to hear something else, something far more rare, more powerful, more honest. Yourself. Not the version of you they wanted. Not the version the world applauded. Not the version you built just to survive. But the man you were meant to become before the world told you who to be. This is the beginning of clarity. And it doesn't arrive with fanfare. It doesn't knock loudly. It waits quietly until you're ready. Because clarity doesn't exist in chaos. It lives in solitude. There comes a moment in every man's life when the distractions fade, when the feeds go quiet, when the phone stays face down, when you're no longer living weekend to weekend, craving stimulation just to feel alive. And in that stillness, something shifts. You start to wake up, not to noise or pressure, but to peace. For the first time in years, you look around and don't feel behind. You don't feel like you're missing out. Because you've stopped running long enough to realize you never really wanted what you were chasing. Solitude strips away the false layers. It peels back the masks. It removes the costumes you wore just to belong. And underneath, it reveals a man you haven't met in a long time. Maybe never. But this is where the real journey begins. Because solitude isn't isolation, it's integration. It's not about leaving the world. It's about returning to yourself. You start asking questions that hit deeper. What's actually mine? What beliefs am I carrying that I never chose? Whose goals have I been sacrificing my life for? What parts of me were built just to be accepted? These questions aren't easy. They don't come with easy answers. But that's the point. In chaos, you react. You perform. You adapt. You shape yourself to fit the room. But in solitude, you observe. You slow down. You begin to notice which thoughts are truly yours, and which ones were downloaded from a world that never had your best interest in mind. You begin to realize the success you've been chasing, it was borrowed. The lifestyle you were killing yourself to maintain, it never felt like home. The relationships you held on to out of fear, they were draining your soul, not feeding it. And maybe, just maybe, the emptiness you felt for so long wasn't a flaw. It was your soul refusing to settle. Solitude gives you room to feel all that, not just think it, but feel it. Fully. Without distractions. Without detours. Without someone else telling you. You're just overthinking. You sit. You breathe. You stay. And in staying, the storm begins to settle. The fog starts to clear. You stop pretending you're okay with things that are slowly destroying you. You stop tolerating conversations that leave you empty. You stop saying yes to invitations that feel like obligations. You stop performing, and in the quiet, clarity walks in. You start honoring your time like it's sacred. Because it is. You start protecting your energy like your life depends on it. Because it does, you create space, not to avoid people, but to make room for what's real. You realize your peace is more valuable than being liked, and your alignment is more important than being understood. So you start saying no without guilt. You stop explaining yourself to people who never respected your yes. You remove yourself from environments that feel heavy, and you do it without apologies, because you no longer need to be accepted by the world to accept yourself. That's the turning point. The man you were chasing approval from, he's gone. Now you chase presence, peace, purpose. Your routines begin to change. You no longer scroll for 2 hours to avoid your thoughts. You rise earlier, not to grind, but to ground. Your morning isn't about catching up, it's about coming back. You light a candle, you make your bed, you stretch, you sit in silence, not as punishment, but as preparation. Your mind becomes clearer, your voice more steady, your decisions more intentional. You don't text out of fear of being forgotten. You don't fill your calendar just to prove you're valuable. You don't chase connection, you attract it by being rooted in something real. And people notice. Not because you told them to, but because your energy now speaks before you do. You carry weight, not heaviness, but depth. You walk into a room and don't need to impress anyone, because you've already impressed the only person that matters, the man in the mirror. You begin to choose friendships with intention. You create a circle that reflects your values, not your past habits. You build a lifestyle that aligns with your soul, not your ego. And this alignment? It becomes your compass. You no longer need to prove your worth. You live it. You no longer need to post about your life to feel significant. You live a life so meaningful, it doesn't need to be broadcasted. And then something beautiful happens. You realize you're no longer available. Not available for chaos. Not available for gossip. Not available for relationships that require you to betray yourself just to keep the peace. You're not distant. You're discerning. You're not cold. You're clear. You're not bitter. You're becoming. This is clarity. This is the reward of solitude. It burns off what never belonged. It refines what was real all along. And it leaves you with something most men never touch in their lifetime. Inner command. You no longer look outward for direction. You look inward for alignment. And when you move with weight. Your life speaks louder than your words. Because now, you live from a place of truth. Not because it's easy, but because it's the only way forward. And when you reach that place, you don't chase anymore. Not women, not applause, not opportunity, because the right people find you, the right doors open, and the world starts to reflect back the energy you've been cultivating within. That's not fantasy. That's mastery. That's what solitude gives you. If you're brave enough to stay, so if your world feels quiet right now, don't scroll. Don't run. Don't fill the space. Listen, because that silence you're hearing, that's not emptiness. That's your soul speaking. So now you've seen the path. Not the one they post on social media. Not the one filled with shortcuts, quick fixes and dopamine hits, but the real path. The one that begins in stillness. That winds through discomfort. That forces you to leave behind who you were told to be, so you can become who you actually are. You've looked silence in the eye. You've broken the addiction to being seen. You've chosen solitude not as isolation, but as elevation. And in that solitude, you didn't find emptiness. You found a mirror. You found meaning. You found you. The truth is, most men will never take this journey. They'll keep chasing, keep performing, keep asking the world to give them what they've never dared give themselves, permission to be whole. But you stayed. You sat in the dark and let it whisper. You let it break you open, so you could rebuild from the inside out. And now, everything is different because a man who doesn't fear silence moves with strength. A man who no longer seeks approval speaks with truth. A man who chooses solitude leads with presence. That man doesn't beg to be seen. He is seen. He doesn't chase validation. He radiates certainty. He doesn't wait to be chosen. He already chose himself. And when you become that man, you don't just change your life. You change the energy you bring into every room. You become the example other men look to. You become the calm in the chaos, the anchor in the storm, the reminder that there's another way to live, not louder, not faster, not more, but truer. And if this journey lit something inside you, a quiet fire, a silent strength, a voice that's been waiting to rise, then don't let it die in the scroll. Type it in the comments. I choose solitude to forge my strength. Not for likes, not for attention, but to mark the moment when you stopped performing and started becoming. And if you're ready to keep going, if you're done with noise, with surface, with living someone else's script, then hit like. Subscribe to Daily Stoic Habits, and stay with us, because this isn't just content, it's a commitment to lead, to live, to become the kind of man who no longer needs to be remembered, because his presence is unforgettable. You're not behind. You're not broken. You're not lost. You're becoming. And that's the rarest thing in the world.